just introduce Big Bull from North Australian Cattle Co. And just ask him to introduce himself and give us a little story on himself.
Hi, my name is ABBA, but everybody just calling me Big Bull. It's a very easy name. I've worked with the North Australian company. It's already 2 years. So starting for buying cattle in Australian Northern Territory in Queensland. Yeah, doing this job is very fun.
Thanks, Iqbal. Right, well, the rest of the now I'm just going to pose a couple of questions to each of the panel to answer. So we'll get through that whole process of asking a couple of questions to each member of the panel, and then I'll throw it open to the floor. There'll be a microphone. Please wait until the microphone gets to you because we are recording all of this. So if you don't ask your question over the microphone, it won't be heard. So yeah, we'll just go through the process of asking a couple of questions, and then we will open it to the floor. Nominate which speaker you'd like to ask a question of, and we'll move forward with it that way. But I'll start with Iqbal. I'm just not comfortable with calling you Big Bull, so I'm not a nickname sort of person. Mate, as a buyer of live export cattle, what are the most important traits that you consider when purchasing livestock?
Sorry, the answer I will make this for clear everything. So, as a live export livestock buyer, my top priority is ensuring the precise availability of livestock requested by customer. This begins with direct and clear communication with agents at the station. I then verify that the cattle meet all specification, type, weight, breed, and price. Our customer, particularly in Indonesia, have diverse requirements. Some prefer full male cattle, while others specifically request full female. Breed preferences also vary significantly. Some insist on hybrid Brahman, while others are open to crossbreeds. All these factors must align with the customer budget and agreed pricing. Open and transparent information exchange with the station is critical. We must clearly understand the customer exact needs to prevent misunderstanding. My role as a live export buyer is to bridge the gap between station farmers and importers. An effective communication in this role is paramount. I frequently observe situations where purchased livestock didn't meet expectation, often leading to import claims against the exporter because the cattle didn't match their specified criteria. My responsibility as a live export buyer to ensure these customer expectations are fully met. This position can be challenging while we strive to cultivate strong relationship with both sides. We must also be prepared to provide detailed answer to the station question. For example, if cattle don't meet the specified criteria during drafting at the station, we need to clearly communicate why and what action will be taken. A crucial part of my role is to find solutions to this challenge, particularly to maintain our vital relationship with the station. For instance, we need to explore ways to sell the cattle that may not be high-grade Brahman, even if they fall into a different sales category. Ultimately, the most important consideration for me is to create a situation where all parts, the situation, farmers, agent, exporter, and importer are satisfied and feel that the trade is fair and mutually beneficial.
That's what we all want, Iqbal. Everybody can be happy, isn't it?
Yes.
It happens every day. But the next question for you, Iqbal, what do high-grade Brahmans have that makes them more popular in Indonesian live exporters?
When discussing what makes hybrid Brahman cattle so desirable, it boils down to specific physical characteristics. Long and ideal body structure, ideal age, a well-developed hump that is not flat back, fine bone structure, it's not big, it's small, standard, straight color. Right now, people in Indonesia is not like brindle and like Brahman. Must importantly have the large ear falling down, It's not like pig here. The strains define what customers currently consider hybrid Brahman. In Indonesia, hybrid Brahman cattle fuel a fierce of competition among feedlots to optimize carcass result for the white market. They employ remarkable techniques and strategies for fattening, including fastest fattening for 70 days, they use a medium male or female Brahman, 120 days fattening with male feeder Brahman or female, and 85 days fattening for heifer Brahman, it's mean like feeder heifer, and even 120 days fattening with the Brahman cows, achieving excellent carcass quality. When Indonesian feedlotters cure hybrid Brahman, I'm confident they can achieve two key goals: optimal average daily gain and high carcass yield. At the end of the fattening program, the objective is to ensure the Brahman cattle produce the best meat quality, focus on meat-bone ratio and meat color. Crucially, minimum fat content, as the majority of consumers in Indonesia prefer lean meat for the meatballs.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just pass the microphone on to. We'll have Tim now. So you probably pretty closely answered both these questions, Tim. Fertility is often regarded as one of the most important profit drivers in the north. Whilst this has been the primary direction for the DAF herd to date, can you see a broad focus which may include growth, carcass merit and poll influence being part of your research in the future?
Yeah, so I guess I probably have answered a lot of that, especially the pollers and the growth. I guess the one we haven't spoken about is meat quality. And again, there's a perception that Brahmans, it's one of the not their strengths or weaknesses, if you want to put it that way. But I would say that other research that we've done has identified that there are quite tender Brahmans out there, so that's another thing that we can improve through selection. So some of the work that we did, putting Brahmans through a feedlot and then sending the meat samples off for analysis, we had shear force values of less than 4, which is what's considered tender, which shows that it can be done with animals from up here, just with quite normal growth paths, and then going through them to a feedlot in Queensland. But then when I sourced data from a guy in the industry who specialises in that area, he's saying you can get shear forces of up to 12 with Brahmans. So there's a huge range there, and I think that's probably another area that we could concentrate on in addition to the ones that I guess I've already talked about and that you've mentioned there.
Thanks, Jim. And in your research, what are the most desirable traits exhibited by high-grade Brahman cattle that are especially relative to the North's volatile climate?
Yeah, well, I guess it is being able to perform in this stressful environment with very little assistance, so without much in the way of pest control, keeping the flies off worming or any of that. They don't get any of that, they've just got to do it by themselves, surviving. We run them in fairly tough conditions on native pasture, with the breeder herd at least. So it's being able to get back in calf and have a calf every year. One thing I've noticed with this herd, the way they seem to do that is that they can get quite thin at weaning, but they seem to really whack the condition on and recover very quickly, so that by the time pre-calving comes around, that they're in quite good condition, so that they then reconceive after calving again quite readily. So we're getting very high pregnancy rates. We cull all the cows that don't have a calf each year in that herd. So yeah, I think ability to perform in a harsh environment would be the thing that, apart from just the measures of fertility with the low days of calving and high pregnancy rates.
Thanks, Tim. We'll move on to Dean. So Dean, with the strength of the American beef market, cull cows in the Northern Territory have moved from being a property byproduct to being a genuine income stream. Has the longevity and survivability of Brahman cows had an impact on numbers available in this market?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I didn't know there was a question, so I'll wing it. But I think the industry needs to stop talking about cows as a byproduct, because without a cow there's no calf. And with all due respect, and they are a product. This time of year they're a product to us. But it's important keep rolling, keep the workforce employed, whether it's Brahman cow, beef cow, whatever that may be. But Brahman cow has a high value to the processor, to the industry, as far as that goes, and there's a market for everything. And you know, certain cuts on Brahman are probably worth more than certain cuts on beef cow. And the trim for one, skinny lean Brahman cow out here, she's done a job, and wearing a calf or whatever that may be. But the trim on that.
I'll sort of start with the suitability and adaptability of the Brahman in the north speaks for itself. The customer has also, indicated to us that that's the article that they most want in Endo as the Brahman over the crossbred. But they're what I call subjective qualities. Objectively, we benchmark against corporate and private operators, and we go, we stack up pretty well. And while we continue to do so, we review it often, which by no means rusting onto the drum. But while we're sort of operating in the top 25% of those benchmarking cohorts, we'd probably stick with the Brahman. The clear risk is we're largely predicated to live export, and if that job was to fall over, what's plan B? I think we'd get some notice, and we'd be very quickly breeding a crossbred animal. That's the contingency plan.
Yeah. So in your opinion, what should Brahman seed stock producers remain focused on to continue breeding Brahman cows that are relevant to the northern industry?
Look, I think we've touched on a lot of that today. I'd be sort of repeating myself, but for me, we're sort of heading along the right track. Eating quality for the domestic market will be a help. Boldness, fertility, growth. Nothing new to any Brahman producers here.
But just nice to reiterate it to the seed stock producers in the ground.
Sorry.
Just nice to reiterate that to the seed stock producers in the ground.
Okay.
But no, you've done perfectly well. Dr. Ross, do Brahman cattle bring unique qualities to the Indonesian live export industry? If so, what are they and how highly should they be valued?
Well, it's most of those feedlots are on about between 8 and 5 degrees off the equator, so those animals are perfectly adapted for that environment. And that's the feedlotter. The feedlotter has to have an animal that's absolutely ready to go as soon as it gets there. They can't have any animals that need acclimatization or anything like that. So the genetics of the Brahman herd in the north now are absolutely perfect for that market.
And I'll ask you the same question that I just asked Carl, even though we have gone over it. What attributes should Australian Brahman seed stock producers be concentrating on to improve performance in the live export industry?
My thing is horns. I hate horns and hate cutting them off and all the damage that done. That's not the question, but I just want to throw that out there again. Horns, get them off. But once the animal's in the feedlot over there, it just needs to grow as rapidly as possible. So the genetic maps, genomic identifiers define those animals within this herd group that can grow faster than others. There's a reasonable range. Most of these in Greg's feedlots are probably the lowest end grows at 1.3, and the top end 1.8 kilograms a day or more. If that could be more closer to the 1.8 to the 1.3, then I'm sure the feedlot would be very happy. It costs them a lot to feed them now, so they really they can squeeze that last bit of growth out.
Thanks, Ross. So I'll just open it up to the crowd now. If anybody has a question, put your hand up. We'll get a microphone to you. Just state who you are, your name, and then which person you want to question, or the panel in general. Yeah, thank you. Ben in Glasgow.
Yeah, Ben in Glasgow from Bundaberg. I run a bit of a backyard show breeding bulls. Been tied up in research in a couple of industries over the years, and got pretty tied up with genomics and all the rest of it. Looking at a lot of figures, and I just wonder, probably from the research people, are we convinced in the Brahman cattle that if we go along the high fertility line with the low days of calving, are we going to reduce size? Because I've seen instances of bulls that have got both. So are we convinced we're going the right way, letting this herd growth rate go down with fertility? Maybe you can, it will happen, but do we think there's ways we can get around it? Because the animal that will put on weight will with a high growth rate and good fertility, I think the animal will start off with it for our economics.
I think that'll be you, Tim.
Yeah, okay. So there are always exceptions to the rule. So there are some big animals with those days to calving, but as an average, that's what happens when you select heavily for fertility, and especially if you do it through identifying early maturing animals. What happens is you end up selecting for a small and mature size. It's just the general way it goes. And I think Matt spoke earlier about how when you've got a much bigger animal, it's harder for them to maintain the body condition required to cycle. But I would say that, I've seen it myself. You see some big animals that always get back in calf, and I guess, can we select from those as well? And that's where indexes and things come from. I think you're waving a bit, Matt. Did you want to add anything?
Thumbs up, right? That's spot on.
Thumbs up. Okay.
Yeah, measure and identify. Read that.
Yeah, Reid Rattle. I've got a question for Dean. Earlier this morning, Dean, you said that you thought there'd be fewer meatworks in the country going forward. Do you think that's going to lead to reduced capacity, or are we going to pick the slack up with the bigger, more efficient meatworks?
Yeah, very good question. I don't necessarily agree that the bigger plants are always more efficient. Sometimes there's a tipping point, like in any operation, but can get to the point where you become less efficient, whether that's through industrial relations or you just try and get too much of the plant. You haven't got control of your people, and you're not getting the yields and efficiencies and the like. I've been involved in many plants over the years, but yes, there's more capacity getting put into the system. In the south, Thomas Foods, Kilcoy, ourselves, there's an extra, 1,300 cattle capacity a day that's been built into just Victoria and South Australia. So the capacity's getting put in, and you multiply that by 251 working days a year, that's a lot of cattle. And there's expansions going on in other plants. I'm not too sure about Queensland, I don't follow that as closely as I do in the south, but there's plenty of capacity there. The restriction on capacity in the last few years has been labour to man the positions and the skill of the labour. And when we had a mostly Chinese, Korean, Taiwanese workforce, our efficiency was 19% better than it is now with the island type workforce and the like. And the difference was that the Asians wanted to. I was happy with it. They wanted to please the boss, and they wanted to work overtime, and they were very disciplined. They turned up sharp knives, and they jamming, and they take instruction, and all this sort of stuff. Whereas some of the nationalities are not like that. So the capacity's there. There's more capacity in the plants than there now. It's having the capacity of the people that are in the plants. I hope that answers that.
Moira Lancer and Kudati. Big Bull, a question for you when you were talking about the specifications. As is selling cattle for live export, if any animal doesn't have a tail or it's missing its ears, it's rejected. And so I was wondering, and both of those traits are very, very much high Brahman traits, but challenges with dingoes and other things in the territory that can diminish. Can you explain to us why they're so important that they have their tail and ears fully intact?
Yeah, that's what I said. It's a very big challenge to sell cattle to Indonesia, but specifically like hybrid Brahman, and after that, where's the reject can go? So that's why right now we have the 2-3 categories. Like one people said called like faulty cattle is like don't bite something. All the like dramas or crossbreed something, we have the crossbreed price. So we want to make everybody happy, like the station is not happy also when they doing the drafting coming in the whole one. So we just want to sell everything in the station, and we discuss to the customer, and or we found another customer who want to donate like crossbreed or faulty cattle.
Probably for you, old big bull. How are you, mate? So, I think Callum pointed out earlier on about getting customers and building relationships. How, as commercial breeders, do we build them relationships? How do we get to know feedback from our cattle? Because a lot of exporters, it's all, you don't hear anything. Once your cattle are gone, all the effort and all the involvement that we have, we don't hear back anything, you don't get back anything. How do we build them relationships? And how do we give people incentive to improve their herds, especially from a Brahman point of view? And your job, with the recent probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, has your job become harder to go and find cattle that suit what you need to buy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We always asking to the customer when we sell this cattle from the property, and we always telling to the customer each property, if you like it, this cattle and how the result, please tell it to us. And some feedlot in Indonesia, they doing every animal is doing like the recording by this is from station, this one and that one. If they like it, they order to us back again in the next year for the first round and second round. And sometimes will be direct call to the agent or station. So this customer want to repeat order for this. But some customer also, when they get good energy and good result, they just shut up and not get anything. We're like, but when they get not get the margin, they always laugh and to, this is not good and anything. So sometimes we must give the education to them. If the cattle good, telling good. If the cattle not good, we can back to station and we telling what the reason.
Yeah, it's Ray Rattle here again. I've just got a question for Callum, and I guess I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit. But Callum, would you be prepared to accept a lesser growth rate or lesser ADG for your cattle in the feedlot in Indo if that's what it took to achieve a fully polled herd?
My advice is, Red, that there is no requirement to sacrifice growth for pollness. I sort of can say no more than that. I don't think we need to go there. If we did, then that's another discussion. But I'm advised by people that I think are at the top of the genetic veterinary tree that trait is not linked to, that horn is not linked to any other trait.
Can I ask Greg a question, I suppose?
We've just got one behind it.
Sorry.
Yeah, Rusty Rector from Hastings. I guess, Cal, just to follow on a question for you. Like for me, it's a little, we produce a high-grade Brahman herd and spend a lot of money, a lot of years doing it. And some of these questions that are coming, you know, about growth weights and, you know, but there's other breeds that have spent years breeding the horns out of their cattle. As the industry, have we been let down by the Brahman Society a little bit, that we've left our run later than any other breed to start producing these pole genetics? It's not until us as producers have demanded this where our seed stock producers are actually starting to produce some of these really good pole genetics. I'd just like to have your take on what you feel about
Thanks, Rusty. And I don't know that I'm better qualified than anyone else here to speak on it, but I've been asking of the guys I buy bulls from for about 10 years. I've been saying we need to go down that track. We need to go down that track. I'm now walk the walk, and I've said if you're not going to show me evidence that you've been really serious, and I've given plenty of notice. If you're not going to be serious about it, I think we need to get serious about it sensibly. Then I've got to go elsewhere. And I would say, you know, we were in the West Kimberley. We were 5 years ago. We were 25% of our heifers, of our joiner heifers, were pole. I'd like to think within 10 years here in the territory, I don't know, we're 70%. You know, maybe it's not realistic to say 100%, but you know, better than 50%, because the day will come when I think it's going to hurt us.
Just a quick comment on that, if I may, and I'll defend your society a little bit. The challenge that Brahmans had was that proportionally the level of poleness in the population was significantly lower than a lot of the breeds who have made seemingly quicker strides in that direction. So you're starting with a smaller gene pool to select from. You know, the need to still select for quality and other traits makes that gene pool even smaller. You know, you had a bigger bottleneck than most breeds had, and you've bred your way out of it really fairly successfully. I think the fact is the right bull can turn a horned herd into a pole herd in one generation. You've just got to pick that bull correctly.
Thanks for defending the association, man. But look, it's a work in progress, and the market's got to ask for people to produce something before they'll start to produce it. No one's going to do it. No, and you know, no one's going to do it off their own bat unless the market is asking for them to do it. A seed stock producer will produce a purple one with yellow stripes and 4 ears if they're asked to do so, and if they're paying a premium for it.
Can I just dovetail into that? What I was saying earlier about, you know, listen to your customer, and you know they're not all going to be on the right track, but if they're giving it to you regularly enough and consistently enough, then if you're not going to follow and listen to your customer, you know, you got to be prepared for them to go elsewhere.
Absolutely, and that's why we have things like this to identify the customer. Thank you. So Henry was.
Yeah, I just want to ask Greg a question. Greg, the future in the future in Indo with the new government, Bravo, is the quota system likely to go eventually? Because it has an impact on a lot of things.
So President
2 weeks ago openly said, we will abolish the quota system. But that has not happened because a week ago they issued another 148,000 head of quota, which takes the total list for this year up to 548. But they will add more if they want. But I doubt it whether there would be an abolishment of a quota, of the live cattle quota system. And Dean talked about the beef quota system. That is even more confusing and smoky than the live cattle is. So I doubt whether the quota system would be abolished.
No, I think it begs the question that if it's maintained and we get a few more feedlots up and running, get more cattle going in there, we won't, you know, the high grade Brahmans that we're talking about won't be able to be supplied to the number that's required. So from the point of view of having Brahman in our breeds is definite for the North Australian terrain, basically, environment. But I think with that in mind, you're sort of always going to need to have something else in the breed to make sure that we can fill the quota regardless of the number, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment that on behalf of a lot of Brahman breeders, we have the demand question about more poles. And there's an increasing number of herds that have been breeding poles. And I believe at Brahman Week about half the cattle now that are being presented, half the bulls are pole. So there are pole bulls around, and I'm surprised we're hearing that they're not available and not of the reasonable quality. You know, pretty good quality goes through Brahman Week. There's 850 bulls on average. There are other sales where there's significant numbers of poles. Some herds been breeding poles for 20, 30 years, so the cattle are about. It's a matter of the buyers seeking them out as well. It's not only the producers producing the animals that are there. We barely sell a horn bull anymore because yes, the brand is for pole bulls, but I know of lots of other people who do the same thing.
Thanks, George.
Can I make a comment?
It would be expected,
I'll be as quick as I can. I hear an assumption that because you select for high fertility that your growth goes out the window. That's not correct. You'll find your mama cows look a little bit smaller because they're working at about 30 or 40% higher speed than the average. But the male progeny, if you analyse it, you have no disappointments. Now I'll quote you a quick figure. I made 197 bulls average on the last 2 seasons. LiveX dollar index is above $100 average. The days to calving average is higher than negative 23. And all the mama cows, they go to meatworks, no one shuts you out. They all fit meatworks grids. So I think you can go into cringe about not fitting. And Dean's your name, isn't it, from one of them? So they all fit in the box. Nothing shorter. I've noticed the Brahman breed going into cringe about meat eating quality, yet we're grinding up over 85% of the meat we produce. Doesn't matter where it goes in the world, it gets ground up. Tenderness isn't an issue, marbling's not an issue. In super butchers in Brisbane, a few months ago, I walked in there to buy Wagyu rumps and the most beautifully expensive meat alive, for the same price as all the grass-fed rumps in the shop. And super butchers are significant outlet of beef in Queensland. I don't know about in other states. To me, if we don't go into cringe mode, the Brahman breed can produce beef cheaper than anything else and quicker than anything else. I've got no doubt about that. The rider is, if you don't measure, you'll never damn well know. That, to me, there's 2 things weakness in the Brahman system. One, that the pole gene isn't very good, the test for it. I use a lot of double P bulls. One of them is bulletproof. I've had a lot of bulls that get mostly pole calves. Double P is. So I think there's a significant amount of work to do on that, just to find a more reliable test of poles. I want pole cattle, and I'll be trying to breed them all my life. But I can't say I'm successful yet. There are some pole cattle come up in the absolute cream of the crop, what we call the alpha group, but they don't dominate it and they have the opportunity to. So there's a fair bit of work to do on that. There's probably more to do with genetic analysis than anything. So I believe the Brahman breed's got to embrace more science, and also say that in the last 10 years we've seen more opportunity to embrace with genomics and with good analysis than we ever had before. So the speed is going to get a lot faster. So whatever demands or requests I've heard today from the speakers, I've got no doubt that Brahman cattle, in my experience, are the most extraordinary beef machine. I'll go one stage further. A Brazilian friend of mine had a lot to do with major pastoral operations in Australia and into the downstream marketing of their beef globally. And he mumbled under his breath, shut up about the cattle maybe getting another 1.25% yield. They eat lots less food when you feed them, and don't even worry about them gaining the feedlot because they don't eat much. And I think you'll find a lot of you blokes will know that already, but it's not publicised. They don't eat a lot of food to give you a lot of meat in the box. Anyway, enough from me. But I'm saying don't go into cringe mode in the Brahma breed. The best of the Brahma breed has extraordinary capacity to do good. I've used 13 different breeds on the road to that conclusion, incidentally. Try them and they evaporate.
Thanks, Al. Great ad for the breed. A little bit for yourself.
Yeah, g'day. Matt, Justin Dyer at Hayfield Station. I've got a serious concern we're not getting to the Brahman breed to a pole status quick enough, and I'm considering all of the herd in North Australia. Do you think it's time the breed society, through MLA or however, think about investing in genetic engineering to get us there a bit quicker?
Yeah, good on you, man. Good.
So, we've had this discussion privately already. It's coming. I just was in Victoria at a Team Tamania thing with Alison Van Anneman. She loves talking about the fanciest, highest tech thing that's on the horizon, and this time it was gene editing. And the obvious trait to do it for is for horns. So it's coming. It's definitely expensive at the moment, but that will change. As you said, as Al said, I think horns, the more we look at it, the more complex it becomes genetically. The initial thought was that it's a straight on-off sort of single gene effect. We can identify that gene, knock it out, and everyone's pole. It is not that simple. There's horn genetics coming from a number of different sources. You may have heard of the African scourge gene and that sort of thing. We don't know where that is. We've got a fair idea, where the markers are for the currently understood horn genes. Don't know where the African scourge gene is. The other serious challenge is getting good phenotypes, good recording of what an animal's horn status is, because we carve those horns off as little calves. And what we really need is good phenotypes in well-recorded horned animals. And they are like hen's teeth, which sounds like a weird thing to be needing, but it's what we need, is really good information about who is truly horned. And we can't tell that after they've had their horns cut off. So there are some holes in what we understand, there's some understanding that what we know isn't everything, but there are pathways to tackling it that will be made quicker by some of these amazing technologies like genetic engineering.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, great answer. A great idea, but hugely complex to achieve. Sorry.
Stuart Bulk here. Justin, just to sort of continue that conversation about the genetic modifying removal of horns, it probably, from looking at other industries outside beef, corn, soybean, cereal grains and such, there's quite a big consumer backlash to GMO products around the world, and Australia in particular has got a big resistance to bringing in GMO products in the grain sector. I think the potential gains of GMO modifying cattle would have a greater backlash from the consumer base and wider public sector than the potential gains. If we already can remove horns, through just selection, I don't think there's going to be a need to ever genetically modify because it's the backlash is going to be greater than what we're already facing.
Just while the mic's coming, just to add to what Matt was saying about the complexities of selecting and recording. So we had a manager years ago on one of our research farms who at weaning put a different brand on the animals for horned or polled or skirt. And so his average age at weaning would have been 6 months old, up to 9 months old. And a year later I couldn't work out which brand meant which. So these horns come through later. If you're recording at weaning, it may not be right.
Absolutely.
I was going to just interject quickly, obviously come from dairy industry, sheep industry, all that you do, Cal. Most of this discussion's been on poll. You're going to be forced to do it. You're not going to get a choice. It's going to be through your social licenses I touched on before. Someone's going to film you, and they'll target the big companies, because that's where they'll get the action, through the boards, through the customers, through whatever it be. We're seeing, if you Google, if you go and watch, look up the Farm Transparency Project, I've got it sitting on my server every day, hoping we're not the next one that comes up. They targeted mulesing years ago. They didn't stop us mulesing. The customer didn't buy off us. In the dairy industry, they targeted debudding of calves. It's in the dairy industry, it's a big thing. There's a couple of million dairy cattle in Australia. You can't dehorn your calves. You've got to get the vets in. You've got to what do you call it? Yeah, you've got to pain relief. Come through. I drove through one of our farms here about last November. I had milk customers in with me from Europe. There was about 130 calves looked like they were dead in the paddock. They were getting debudded. They were getting, for the customers. The milk factories will not pick up your milk unless you can show them the invoice from the vets. So you'll get forced to do it anyway. And it's not my view. It's fact. That's the way I said. The customer will make you do it, or they won't buy your stock. That's not today, but it might be in 2, 3, 5 years from now.
Val Dyer from ABBA Proprietary Limited. My question is to Tim, a bit of a change in the subject. With regards to phosphorus deficiencies and the provision of supplements, my understanding, which probably needs to be clarified by you, is that during the wet season when the grass is growing and everything's pretty good, feeding phosphorus providing phosphorus supplements, which we do and always have done during the wet season, that the cow can store that so that when the feed is dry, they will still have phosphorus in their system. So my question is that sort of right? And how long does that storage take to diminish during the later or during the dry season to when we do need to feed that minimum sort of phosphorus in those supplements once again? Or is it? Well, I'll leave you to answer that.
Sure, and it's not going to be a simple answer because it doesn't work that way, but yes, cows, phosphorus mobilises around cows, so it can be deposited into bones and withdrawn out of bones when the diet's not adequate. So it cycles around and a lot of it goes out through the milk. So of course, yes, if you've got a good bank of phosphorus, like you do it as a bank balance, if there's a good bank, it's going to last longer. But if the cow is lactating, there's a really high phosphorus content in the milk, and so she's going to get quite depleted then. So as to how long it lasts through the dry season, well, it depends how big her bank was to start with, whether she lactated or not. So yeah, I mean, it's not a cut and dry answer, but generally, yes, if you, the best thing is just to make sure you've put out phosphorus in the wet season. We've shown that the return on investment is massive, over 700%. So it's just one of those things that should be up there with botulism vaccination, I reckon, as far as you just do it. For animal welfare reasons as well, because when you don't do it, that's why you see all these mortalities in cows that just get too skinny. So there's that. What's something else I was going to talk about? Now I've slipped out of my mind, but if I think of it, I'll come back to it. Yeah, but basically you get your bang for your buck in the wet season from phosphorus. It's not limiting in the dry season when protein is a limiting nutrient then. Oh, that's it. Yeah. And so what I hear from a lot of properties who start feeding phosphorus is that the cattle just gorge on it and they say we're going to go broke. But it's because they're depleted, and once they've got their stocks up, they'll slow right down. It's like they sort of know how much they need. So there is that element to it as well. Hopefully that seems the question.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow on to with Dean's comment. 2, 3, 5 years is a long time. And you think that this isn't, well, it's obviously it's not just a Brahman issue, it's a cattle issue. Whether it's a dairy farm or beef herd in Victoria or wherever it is. I mean, the horns have been an issue for 30 years, but yet here we are still. I'll just say again, whether you think it's time through Cattle Australia or whoever to have this debate about the ethics and morality of genetic engineering and get on with it.
That really was the question, sorry.
Yeah, I thought that, Justin. I was hoping it wasn't.
Steph Coombs with a question for Callum. In the last 3 years, the Wakefield herd has gone through a pretty impressive transformation. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Or at least what that says? It's true.
Thanks, Steph. Great plug for Wakefield. Look, in 3 years, we bought it in 21. We've bought over 400 bulls, grey Brahman bulls. We've culled pretty much every other breed bull from the herd. We've gone particularly hard spaying and culling, crossbred and out of type cows, and it's amazing how quickly you can turn a herd, which was, to be fair, I think was probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, was a beautiful grey Brahman herd, but it had other stuff crossed into it. How quickly you can bring it back. There's some terrific underlying genetics. Thanks.
Tim, just a question for you around the carcass tenderness that you did. Did you measure any pre-death traits in those animals before the shear force was conducted?
What traits?
Any traits in the live animal before measuring up on the carcass, or was there any? Did you find any pre-death links, I suppose, in those traits?
So we didn't look so much at associations with other traits. So it was a comparison between Brahman MSA voting group. So Brahmins, unfortunately, just get penalised because they physically take a ruler and measure the hump height, and the higher your hump height is, the more you get penalised. So that's how the MSA system works, because they've found an association with hump height and toughness. So that's, if you want to change that, you have to take up the MSA system. But that's how it works. And so we were looking at whether we, through crossbreeding, so this project was initiated as a risk mitigation sort of strategy, as Callum talked about earlier. So if the live export gets taken away, whether that's through disease or politicians saying the wrong thing or whatever, and overnight there's no live export, what the producers up here do. And so we were looking at, do they get into crossbreeding? If they do, can you produce animals that will survive in our environment with the females? Do they produce offspring that perform well in our environment and then in the feedlot and have better meat tenderness when they go south? And so we found that all those things were right. But in the process of doing it, and why I mentioned it, was that we also found that the meat tenderness of the Brahmins in the study was very good. And I think that's the story in itself, is that when Brahmins are managed well, they've got good nutrition, low age at turn-off, that they can hit the target as far as meat tenderness and be very good.
Moira will answer it. And so I've got my questions aimed at both you, Matt, as Brahmin Breed Society, and Dean. What work is being done now by the Breed Society to actually elevate the Brahmin breed as a good meat eating quality? And to you, Dean, I was just wanting to know, whether, through your meatworks, and you're seeing a whole spectrum of different breeds of cows and cattle, do you identify the higher performing individual carcasses and shift them different ways? And so how well are you seeing that variation and stuff within the Brahmin, or are you restricted by the NSA on height?
It's a good question. Matt, do you want to go first?
I was hoping you would.
I'm used to it, but I might get lynched sitting up here. But customers and the Angus Society's marketed themselves very, very well. And my sister, she's lovely, but she's got no idea, even though she was brought up in this family. But when McDonald's came out with Black Angus burger, she said you can taste the Black Angus in it. That's that. But it's a yield, it's yield quality. With trims, it does not matter, because it's ground up, it's kicked across the floor, and then they turn into a paddock. But it's a yield. Out of, let's say, 230 kilo carcass Brahman cow here, it will yield us meat to bone. It'll yield us about 69%. The Angus cow that's lived in a similar age, but from the south, it's not from over here, it's going to yield us 71%, and it's just characteristics of what we get out of them. As for the eating quality, they're bigger cuts, so they go into a different market. But the lighter Brahman cow, they go in the same market as dairy cow, and the customer doesn't complain, so there is a market for it. But it is a commodity. The better, bigger Brahman cows that come out early in the season, they do go to the same customer as an Angus cow. Maybe not an Angus cow, a British bred cow, as far as that goes. But cow meat, I'm talking cow meat, I'm not talking grain-fed meat. Cow meat's cow meat, largely. They pay a discount for it, they can't expect us to cook it and eat it for it. It's cow meat.
Yeah, and as far as what has the association done, probably since about 2013, we've been breeding and killing steers as part of our project. All of those steers have had a full suite of meat quality sampling done. We actually remove an inch thick piece of their strip loin and send it down to Armidale for meat testing. And all of the cattle are genomically tested before that happens, and we're now up to second and third generation of those cattle, so we are collecting all that data. It's also allowed us to benchmark those cattle on an MSA structure, and we've usually gone quite well in the fact that we're probably getting a 35 or 40% MSA grade of index of about 54.5 or 55 or better, which is sort of known to be about the meat quality section where we want to be. Like that's about Woolies grade, Woolies supermarket grade and better. They don't generally go a lot higher than an index of 58 or 59. We have had them as high as that, but that's where they about top out. I mean, hump height is a real thing. Like the science and the meat samples that have been collected during MSA and during their thousands and thousands and thousands of taste tests, the fact that Brahman cattle do contain calprostat does influence them. We have worked really hard, and we've done a few trial mobs. We've done cattle we've killed for beef to try and find pathways for Brahman cattle off better country into MSA. They are there. They probably start with no use of HGPs, easy weaning, guaranteed plan of nutrition, killed at 2 tooth and less, with a really good growth plan, so that because, you know, in the MSA model, ossification is actually used with carcass weight, so they have to show pretty dynamic growth and a good carcass weight. But yeah, we've had producers in Central Queensland get up to 80-85% compliance with the top MSA indexes. But you know, they're coming off some pretty good country. But it is possible. It's not just breed specific. That's why we don't get it to an Angus level, but we definitely get it to a good enough level. And that's like, with our bin projects and the genetic validation testing that we're doing for that, it is going to become part of it. It is part of genomics. And you know, we're probably, and we have discussed it, we're not that far away from having a eating quality EBV. So yeah, we're in the process. It's not an easy job, but we are working towards it. Yes.
I worked in a meat research laboratory back in the 1970s, and the two most important things that came out of that meat research laboratory about meat quality was what you feed them and how you slaughter them and how you hang them afterwards. They are much greater influences than breed differences, and we're fighting a battle of propaganda rather than anything else. And also, of course, Brahmins come from much more difficult country. We breed cattle that suit the environment rather than try to change the environment for the cattle. And it's not pushed hard enough. I mean, Angus cattle are the best marketed breed of cattle in Australia. And we should be spending a lot more money on marketing if we want to get on top of that. If we feel we're not getting good value in the way our cattle are sold.
I totally agree on that. We do a lot of French steers, don't we, gentlemen? We talk about HGPs. Someone says, what's my view on HGPs? I say, give them 2 pills. You know, because for the right animals, they work. And where we found our marketing involved in the Middle East with our Friesians, we were trying to compete with the British breds. When we owned our situation with Friesians, they're Friesians, they're grain fed 100 days. That's what they'll do. We say to get premiums. Because we found the customer that wanted it, we showed them it was consistent, and they like chickens. And no reason it can't be done with Brahmins. It's been done with merino lambs, it's been done with Dorper lambs in the lamb industry. But it's a Brahmin, be proud that it's a Brahmin, market for its characteristics and its traits, and find the customer. So you mentioned
That's great, Dean. You're the first processor to talk to me like that. All the ones I was involved with used to tell me the Brahman name would never sell a cut of meat as long
because
as...
for the lack of efficiencies, they're trying to get your cattle cheaper.
Exactly, Dean. Well said. Because what George said before about culture and propaganda shouldn't drive our industry. What I wanted to say, and I forgot before, was Brahman breeders generally, and I've got relatives in the same pack, who are frightened of measuring cattle. I can assure you that every herd represented in this room, and all the ones that are not, have got animals that are quite extraordinary, and I'm speaking from experience. I analyse them. So All I'm suggesting is the more you measure, the more animals you find and the more decisions you can make to take you to where you want to go. So don't go into the cringe mode. I got some country up in the Gulf, it's all rocks and bloody trees. But the cattle stay alive. Nothing else will live there. And there's a lot of Northern Australia. I've travelled all over Northern Australia, right again, you've known me for a long time. Just looking and thinking, this is the home of Brahman cattle or adapted cattle. And we've seen lots of breeds come and go. So I'm going to say it again. Don't go into cringe mode. Just go on the front foot and measure what you're doing and how you'll be astounded at the progress. And Dean talked about it in his meat packing business. They measure everything. He's not unique. We all know people in other industries who do the same. You measure, you will really kick ass, and I mean that. There is no doubt in my mind, so please take that on board. You don't have to be the same as everyone else, but measure and you will change the face of the world.
And is it no mistake, Alf, that Angus is also the most highly measured breed that are out there? Is that part of the reason for their success?
Oh, it's part of the formulation of the training project.
I think the key message is that we've got an article that we produce out of Northern Australia, and to say to find the market, we've got a market. They want a grey Brahman or a red, straight coloured Brahman. What we're asking for is we need to promote that, and I think that needs to come from the Brahman Society, promoting what we have got. Henry touched on it. There's people in the industry up here that have changed their breed, and then they're looking for it. So, okay, we go south, we don't get the premium market, but if we've got a crossbred animal and they go to Indonesia, they have to take less money because we've got the premium article that they want in Indonesia. But I think from industry, we want representation from the Brahman Society to say we have got the article for Northern Australia. We seen it in 2011 when our industry got shut down. I don't know how many producers that I heard say straight away, we've got to change our breed, we've got to change our breed. Now that's where I want our Brahman Society to step up and say, we can MSA grade these bullocks, we can send them to the China country, we can meet these measures and be proud of the product that we produce. But I strongly, really strongly agree that we need better representation of just saying we've got a tremendous article. You look at the, I don't know, I'm taking a stab here, but the Brahman herds that were in the territory have probably gone back to 50% to what they were. So, you know, we talk about taking less for our cattle because they're lesser weights. Some of our better Brahman herds up here, we've sold over 3,000 cows so far, had to travel 1,000 kilometres to the weighbridge and averaging well over 470 kilos. So we've got the article here, we just need to promote it. And we need people behind us to say, we don't need to change our breed. We're producing a really good article.
Rusty, I think, and I'll get shot for this, I think MSA is actually holding you guys back.
Exactly.
We don't use MSA. MSA was developed for British breeds and this, that, and every other thing. If it's holding you back, disregard it. We don't touch MSA. And, play on the field you should be on, get rid of MSA, disregard MSA because they're benchmarking against a totally different product, which is British breed. Own your characteristics and run with it.
Well, I guess look at it now. How many processors have come to the territory to get the numbers? So when they want numbers, they come.
And we pay.
Yeah, and they pay. So I think that's where we've got an article where they, if our live export shuts down, what does that do if all of a sudden all our cattle end up heading south? That kills the beef industry in Australia. So we need to look after what we've got. I think what we should learn from the live export shutdown was we were reactive. Now we have to be proactive. Now, through our society, to actually say we have got the article for them. And not only are we producing the best article, but we're actually feeding thousands of millions of poor people over there, providing protein. And I guess I'm pretty passionate about this because I've been in the industry for a long time, and that's what we want. We want representation and putting our breed out there to say we do a wonderful job with what we've got in the climate we've got.
Point taken. I mean, I think, point taken.
Brad here again. Question for you, Callum. With your herd improvement and your weaning percentages where they are, how important is management, mushroom practices, nutrition to get to that figure? And do you think the Brahman cow has been unfairly targeted by some operations through their own misbreed?
Good question. There's no question. A big part of that is management. As I said earlier, focusing on doing the not sexy stuff really well. That's our view. We included in that. We to get to mid 70s, we're feeding a lot more lick, both wet and dry season lick than probably most do in a benchmarking sense, both private and corporate. We're really whacking the lick into them. I think it pays. How much do the genetics play? It's hard to say.
We've probably got time for just a couple more questions. Is there anybody that hasn't asked one yet? It's going down. I'm sorry.
I already had asked one, but anyway. So I'm Gihan Jawad, and I'm breeding grey Paul super fertile Brahmins. And my question is for Dr. Ross. So Ross, what's the situation on lumpy skin, and can that be a danger to us in Australia?
Sorry, I missed the first part. What about lumpy skin?
What's the situation around lumpy skin at present in Indonesia and north of us? And what's the danger of it getting here, mainly considering that it's insect borne?
I haven't got the faintest idea. So I did a lot of research on lumpy skin, and it went around the third way around the world in about 6 years. From Egypt up into the Middle East, and then China, down through Malaysia, Vietnam, and into Indonesia. All that way, I think it's 4,000 kilometres in 6 years. During COVID, when there was no animals moving anywhere, the only time smuggling stopped during COVID because they were dying. It then got to East Java, the eastern end of Java, and there's a little bit of salt water between East Java and Bali. I forget the name of the strait. It's about 2 kilometres across. You can see the other side. And for 3 wet seasons, lumpy skin hasn't got from that side of the water to that side of the water, and the wet season wind blows from the west straight to Bali, and it hasn't got there. So before that evidence presented itself, I was sure that we would be infected in no time, 1 or 2 years. But now I don't know. And there is, if it was in Bali, we'd know about it, because those cows, beautiful orange skin, you can see it a mile away. So it's really quite bizarre how that happened. And it went through Java in 6 months. And now, in 3 years, it hasn't got across 1 little bit of water. So I don't know. But it doesn't matter about what breed it is. The only animal that's resistant to black skin disease as the buffalo. All cattle are equally susceptible.
Including the back there?
Yes.
Last, you're right, George. One more question if anybody's up to it. Other than that, I'd just like to thank everybody. The success of these conferences is probably best dictated to by the quality of speakers that we seem to attract. It's one thing we've never had any problem doing, but I do think this year we did have an outstanding line of speakers, and I'd like to thank Brad, Inglis and Lisa for the help that they've done in putting that together. Thank you very, very much. Thanks to everybody that made this happen. My wife Fiona. Hopefully it's been a great event for everybody. It's been one of the best turnout. Thanks for turning up. The bus does go at 4. Tonight the bus will leave the motel for the dinner at 5:45. 5:30. See, I'm wrong already. Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody that was involved. Brad, Lisa, the whole crew. I'd like to congratulate the newly formed Northern Territory branch. We hope they become active over the next couple of years, and let's hope everybody gets together and helps promote this great breed. We have a go. If anybody's got any ideas, please come to us. We're never backwards in coming forwards with good suggestions. Thank you very much for attending.